My guest today is Jeff Johnston, who is an author, entrepreneur, and advocate. After losing his son, Seth, in 2016 to fentanyl poisoning, Jeff decided to change the trajectory of his life. He created the brand Living Undeterred. In today's episode, Jeff and I talk about the Living Undeterred Tour, a 95-day cross-country trip with the goal of building a network of contacts and resources to help develop alternative solutions to the mental health and addiction crises. Welcome to LIFEOLOGY.
Hey, James, it's great to be on LIFEOLOGY for the second time. You and I met a while back before this tour was even an idea, but I'm excited to be back and really appreciate your advocacy and the support you do to help those struggling with mental health issues.
It is my absolute pleasure. Unfortunately, we had to meet under these circumstances, but I am glad that you are the type of person that when life happens, things can be a stumbling block or become a stepping stone, and you are a wonderful role model of what to do when life just happens.
Yeah, I look at this adventure I've been on for the last 5 years. And as I said on the last time I met you, that, 5 years ago, everything was great. I was on top of the mountain, like a lot of people, you kind of reach that pinnacle. You've worked hard since you were in college, and you kind of go, wow, this is great. The view from the top is nice. And then all of a sudden, boom, just like that, life, like it does for so many of us, just gets the carpet pulled out from under us. And that's what happened, and that's kind of where the story started, and that's my passion. So I've got this quote I think embodies what I'm trying to do with Living Undeterred, and it's purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And I think if people wrote that down and read it numerous times during the day, we're all seeking meaning and purpose, and sometimes we find it early. Sometimes it's revealed to us through things like death. And for me, it's clearly defined what my purpose in my life is now, and that's to go out, find alternative ways to increase not just the well-being, but the mental health in this country. Yeah.
Now, previous to 2016, you were in the finance world, and you have an amazing financial company as well. And so everything happened. Unfortunately, everything happened. And then just recently, unfortunately, your wife passed away as well from alcoholism. With all those traumatic events that have happened, to go from one world of finance to all of a sudden go to this world of advocacy, what's the same what's different and what's the same about you?
That's a great question. I think I get asked a lot about, resiliency and mental toughness. And I think it goes all the way back to my childhood. I grew up with three brothers. My dad was a two-sport All-American athlete, got drafted by the Cubs to pitch, and ended up going into being a doctor. So he was in private practice and worked at the University of Iowa for a long time. But I learned a lot about competition and confidence and optimism. And so building up my financial practice, those traits really helped me tremendously. And then when all of a sudden I pivoted from having an interest in managing money to now having an interest in trying to manage people, I think some of these things I learned early in my life really helped me deal with becoming undeterred and having resiliency. It wasn't like all of a sudden I was like negative and struggling with things, and then boom, one day I just woke up and I was, Mr. Positive.
Sure.
That is just an illusion. And I still every day have to practice certain things so I don't take shortcuts and fall back into those terrifying moments of even suicidal ideation, which I've had, as recently as over the holidays, believe it or not, which is just
of course
terrifying for me.
One thing I really want to normalize is, and also thank you so much for your transparency and honesty, because sometimes people just see us on the side of the camera and they think, oh my gosh, this person is this or that, and not realizing that we all have our own struggles. And having our own struggles doesn't mean it stops us from not feeling, doesn't mean it doesn't do whatever. And so the difference is just because the person has a thought doesn't mean that we've activated that thought. And so when life became very difficult, when anniversaries happen, when holidays happen, it's very easy to fall back in the mentality of what was, as opposed to what is. And so when we get lost in that and then grief hits us, and that's a very natural thing. There's so many different cycles of grief. We may think we're done with grief, and all of a sudden it hits us again. We're like, oh my God, where did this even come from? So it's incredibly normal that you would have some of those feelings. The difference is you didn't act on those feelings. And so I want to normalize that, because we all at times have had those feelings. And so it's very normal and when I say normal, we've all had it. And so the difference is what do you do with that information? So that's one of the great things about your tour is helping people find resources. So when people do have those thoughts, they do want to act on it. Your tour and Undeterred Tour is creating these opportunities for people to find the help that they need.
Yeah, one of the really big motivators for me is as we embark on this journey in a few weeks, is I look at what's already been done. I look at what we're doing right now to deal with mental health. And people ask me, what's changed the narrative mean, Jeff? It sounds just so, politicized to say that term, change the narrative.
And buzzwords. Yeah.
Yeah. Or raise awareness. It's like, if awareness was making a difference, then we wouldn't put labels. Then labels on food we ate would help us lose weight, but we're the heaviest industrial country in the world and we're getting heavier. So putting more labels on food isn't making people more aware about weight control and healthy eating. So I'm not sure just awareness on these issues is what my objective is. I want to find actionable items that people can implement to start to implement strategies to make their lives better. So awareness obviously is important, but I think we want to go deeper. I think we want to peel back and really get into the demand side of addiction, not necessarily the supply side. I'm not going after drug cartels and big pharma. I want to figure out why people are making the decisions that they are making, and then why they're unable to stop the destructive ones. And that's, you were in private practice for a long time, and you've got a lot of experience in that area. So I'm going to meet a lot of people like you on the tour that can open my eyes to alternative ways of thinking about these things. So that's why we're making our tour a little bit unique, in that I'm not just going around an angry dad pounding my fist saying this has to stop. That's not how I think I'm going to make a difference. I think I really have to start peeling back the layers and getting into the decision-making process that people are making with these decisions they're making.
Exactly. What happened for you to say, yes, I really want to do this tour. This tour needs to happen.
It's funny you ask. Like everybody, I'm fairly competitive. I admit publicly I have imposter syndrome, so I compare myself constantly to your podcast, to books I read. I'm always trying to make myself better. I don't do it to make myself feel worse. I do it to improve my life. Who's doing the best out there? That's what I want to be like. And so I was on my elliptical one day. I jumped off, and this was like last May. So I already had my podcast. I had my book. I had a lot of my projects going. I just was feeling like I wasn't doing enough, James. And I think as a high-strung attention deficit human, I don't know if I'll ever satisfy that urge to always be getting better. It's almost an addiction or a drug itself. But I saw some dad that was riding on his bike across the country or his state he was in, and he was raising money for breast cancer. So I looked and I thought, well, that's awesome. The guy's obviously purpose becomes passion when he got personal. And I said, well, I don't want to ride a bike. And Iowa's too small. We already have Ragbri here. It's a huge global bike ride. And I thought, well, I'll do the next best thing. I went up to Camping World the next day and made a pitch for some crazy idea called the Living Undeterred Tour. And I bought a 34-foot RV, came home, and I called all my friends. And I said, hey, guess what? I'm going around the country with my boys. We're going to raise $1 million. And they're like, when are you doing this? And I said, July. So this was in May of last year.
Oh, my gosh.
So I was going to do this in 60 days. And they're like, dude, you got to... this is a good idea, Jeff, but it's going to be a disaster if you come into this unorganized. So you have to pull the plug, be intentional. And that's what we did. So now we leave on May 9th, and we have 3 stages on the tour. So the first stage is the West Coast and so forth. And then we come back, and my son graduates high school, my youngest son. And then we're going to regroup. Then we head off to the second stage, which is all the East Coast. And then the third stage, we come down and see you. We'll be down in Florida. We have a stop in Fort Lauderdale, which is near Miami. And then we have a stop in Tampa.
Awesome. That is so exciting.
Yeah. So I'm terrified, to be honest with you, James. I really am flying really blind. People think we're really organized. We have states I have no contacts in, but we're just going to wing it. We're just going to pull into town, reach out to support groups, advocacy groups, try to do interviews, just, figure out we can go across America and share stories. And I think being vulnerable is a big key to this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And because the more vulnerable we are, the more we can all connect on an emotional level. The transparency that you had as far as some of those thoughts you had, that's something where, like I said, we've all had those thoughts before. So when we connect on an emotional level, we're able to be more unified. We all have our life, socioeconomic background, political affiliation, all that may be different, but we all know what it feels like to have loss. We know what it feels like to have heartache. We know what it feels like to experience grief. We know what it feels like, whatever it might be. We all have that emotional connection. So one of the great things about the Living Undeterred Tour is you're joining with everybody at an emotional level. Someone knows someone who has some type of addiction or mental health struggle. And so with that, that's where everybody can remove all their background and come together to really be a part of this amazing grassroots movement.
Yeah, it was really important for us. And I say us, we have 4 people on our team right now. But it was really important for us to not make this about Jeff Johnston, to not make this, like I said, the angry dad from Iowa tour where I'm just going out there and telling everybody what you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do that. It's like, that's not in my DNA to do that. Instead of focusing on fear, I want to focus on hope and inspiration, because those are really the two ways we change behavior. We scare people or we inspire them. So, and that goes back to my financial behavioral finance background, where to get people to change their relationships with money, we had to inspire them. You can't scare people that they're going to run out of money and all these things. You got to show them a beach, show them that vision in their mind. And so I think when working with people struggling with mental health, substance abuse, and addiction, it's the same thing. We don't want to scare them about incarceration. We don't want to scare them about divorce or bankruptcy. We want to inspire them. If this guy from Iowa, I'm nothing special, man. I really am not. I'm just a Midwest dad. If I can do this, then certainly many other people can do this and even do more than what I'm doing. And we don't have to let the narratives of death, the sadness and the bleakness and the scenes of a funeral of everyone crying. I mean, we have to change how we process grief.
Yeah,
I really do. And I don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing about meeting so many different people in this tour, is you'll be able to flesh out what that looks like for everybody. In an ideal world, changing the narrative on this, what would that look like?
It's a good question. I think an ideal world for me would be, one, I want to change the mindset that people have towards events like I went through. And I know the book says you have to do all these stages and you have to do this and that. And I'm like, first of all, everyone has to do what they need to do. I can't tell somebody there's 5 stages, there's 3 stages, there's no template. Yeah. When you get that phone call, you just go into complete shock, and you kind of invent stuff on the way. And you're kind of in damage control, but you're also hypersensitive and aware to everything around you. So you're really trying to process all that data coming in. But you certainly don't have to just crumble and watch your life unravel. And then, unfortunately, like with my wife, and I'm not being disparaging at all to anybody that has a hard time. Obviously, more people do than don't. But when our son died, she died. Yeah. And I watched her over, a 4-year time span self-destruct, and we tried everything. And, maybe for her, that was the best efforts. Maybe she was trying her hardest. And maybe it was just something I missed, or something we missed as a family that we could have helped her. But, I can't go back and help her now, but I certainly can help her legacy and my son's legacy and those other families that have lost loved ones. We can continue these conversations. So, I think for me, it's changing stigmas, it's changing labels, it's being vulnerable. And as I mentioned when I first met you, but Johan Hari wrote about, I think maybe in his TED Talk, he wrote a book called Chasing the Scream, which is an awesome book on the war on drugs. He said the opposite of addiction is connection. And if you think about that for a minute, if I ask everybody what's the opposite of addiction, James, they're going to say sobriety, being clean. He's like, no. The opposite of addiction is connection. I'm like, man, there's something beautiful about that. Yeah. There's something really awesome about that.
So much isolation goes along with addiction. So when someone's addicted, they have this, I don't want to be pejorative or to say people are different. So my viewers and listeners, they hear me say that I'm explaining something, but not classifying someone as something. So when people struggle with that, what they do is they often have this mentality of, I'm different, or if anybody found out about me, they would think this about me. So we have this narrative that how we want the world to see us, but then strip all that away. And when someone's in an addictive pattern or state of mind, they can only think about getting the pleasure of whatever that addiction is. Right. But in doing that, there's some shame that comes with it, knowing that it doesn't fit the social norm. So therefore, people start to isolate. So you'll know if someone is using, or if they've relapsed, is all of a sudden their social connection decreases. And so if the social connection decreases, that goes from isolation. And so more isolation then creates this narrative in their head of whatever it may be. Well, now I'm just chasing the high, or I'm chasing something. Or if people were to find out, then they would think this about me. So it creates this, it almost holds someone in like an emotional hostage in a lot of ways. And so an emotional hostage or a terrorist of some sort, they often will not allow people or blackmail people. They won't allow them to really talk about it. And so that's really what addiction does, is just like you said, is it creates isolation, and isolation unfortunately leads to more negative behaviors or unhealthy behaviors, which can unfortunately then lead towards overdose.
Yeah. And what I've learned so far, like I said, I just got thrust into this 5 years ago. Before all this happened, mental health was not even on the radar for me.
Sure.
But, as I keep going through this and I start seeing the sharing of stories that people, and I have so many stories I could tell you where I walked out of that conversation with one or two people. We're both benefited from that conversation. And really, it took one of us basically putting our guard down. Instead of talking about the fancy car or the houses we have or the great job we have or how many smart kids we have that make honor roll every semester, it's like, you know what? I thought about killing myself over Christmas, dude.
Mm-hmm.
No, it sucked. It's terrifying. But I know why I did. I took shortcuts. Yeah. I skipped my meditation. I skipped my workouts. And I'm never doing that again. So there's always a lesson in every story. And I think if we can, as a society, learn to be the one that cracks that door first and not wait for people to do it first, you'll find out really quick if people don't want to go down that road.
Mm-hmm.
You really will without badgering them. But you're going to find out more times than not, I believe, that when you crack that door, the floodgates open. And I heard someone say a long time ago that as you get older, your funnel of friends shrinks,
Mm-hmm.
Mine's just the opposite, dude. I'm 56
really?
And I'm adding friends left and right, and I'm eliminating. I don't have as many toxic relationships, but when I'm 90, I'm going to have this inverted funnel where I'm just going to have so many close contacts. Awesome. So that narrative I'm trying to change too. We don't have to age and slowly get smaller and smaller and smaller in our world. We should, like Johann Hari says, we should be adding to the well of humans that we can tap under any circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that 100%. You said something a little bit earlier that I really wanted to showcase as well. You said you realized with the decisions that you made that you had skipped your meditation, you skipped your workouts. And when we create structure for our day, structure is order. Opposite of order is chaos. Chaotic behaviors can often be linked with addiction, can be linked with a lot of mental health struggles. Doesn't mean the person is that way, but it just means the behavior. And that's what we're talking about, the addiction. And so when you think about that for yourself, you were in a position where if you skipped your routine of sorts, you were then allowed chaos to come into your life, because if you knew these specific things were what you needed to do to net you the outcome you're looking for, that is your version of a treatment plan, or that's your version of an action plan to make sure that you don't go down that road because you have to do these certain things. So I really wanted to link that together to every time we want to create a change, we have to create a plan. And whatever that plan may be, so you reverse engineer it. So if I want to stop a behavior, well, what are things I know I do which leads towards that? For example, when it comes to advertising, I'm sure it's probably just me, but if I see a commercial about pizza, I'm like, oh my God, I want pizza. And the next thing I know, 3 days later, I've ordered a pizza. It's not because I wanted it in the moment, but because I allowed one thought to come into my mind. And that thought then linked to another thought, which links to another thought, which links to another thought. And pretty soon I'm now engaged in the behavior. And so that's the same type of thing when it comes to addiction is addiction actually starts with a thought, or relapse starts with a thought. And so if we're struggling in anything, if we know that if we don't do these specific things for our routine, unfortunately, it will cause us to go down a road that's not healthy for us. So whether people struggle with addiction or mental health or substance abuse, if you don't create a routine and stick to your routine, unfortunately, you will revert or regress to an unhealthy behavior. So just like you went through that, I have to be mindful of my own behavior, because the more mindful and intentional we are about that, the healthier and more quickly we can develop into the person we want to be.
Yeah, and what in my case, what had happened was I was going through boxes after my wife died, and I found one box of just Seth stuff. I actually there's a letter in there he wrote when he was in prison that I've never read, and to this day I've not read it. I got one page done, and I kind of I don't want to read it because it gives me something to look forward to.
Makes sense. That's what we call an approach avoidance conflict. And that's exactly what you're experiencing. If you read it, then it takes away from
exactly. So it's giving me that carrot dangling in front of me that I know I got something to read about my son that I've never read before. So I don't know if I'll ever read it. But in my case, I opened up the second box, and it was my wife. It was our pictures to Europe. It was our wedding pictures. And James, I went from like I am right now with you to my first brush with suicidal ideation in a matter of minutes. And it hit me so hard. It was so terrifying. And for 2 days, I shut my computer off, my phone. I don't really remember what happened from Friday to Sunday, except my business partner came over and everyone thought I'd taken my life because no one could reach me. I really don't remember what I did. I didn't drink. I didn't take any pills. I just kind of went off into some other, I don't know what I did. I can't explain it.
Yeah.
But after I realized how close I got to really doing something that I never thought I would ever get to, I realized, okay, I took shortcuts. That I let my guard down. And so it wasn't the content of the box that triggered me. It was the contents of this box that allowed me to have those thoughts come in that, I just can't do it again. And so my meditation, now I added time to it. My workout, I added time. And I do that more important than eating or sleeping is those two things. Because I know if I skip them, that beast can show up on my front door again.
Certainly can. And once again, I truly appreciate your transparency in that. And I'm sure so many of my viewers and listeners right now can relate with that because we've all been blindsided by emotions. They're like, oh my God.
It was so quick. It was so quick. I mean, literally, it's like right now I feel really good talking to you. And it's like, in a matter of seconds, I'm like, God, this is insane. I've never had this. Yeah. I even buried my wife and my son. I never thought about suicide. It was some stupid box. You know, and I wrote a book about my son. So how could a box trigger me? But it did. I let my guard down. I'll never do that again.
And that's a very powerful lesson. And once again, a lesson we all can learn as well. I do want to transition into the tour. So you're it's a 95-day tour. How many states are you going to be visiting?
Yeah, well, our plan initially was every state, but we're having some issues with a few states. We just can't drum up contacts and people. I think a couple organizations have committed and they've called us and said, well, we think your thing's too big. We can't accommodate you. So it's like, and I don't mean too big as like I'm being arrogant, but I mean, we're coming in, we want to have this big presentation. We want to do tours and people I think are a little intimidated that they thought maybe this was like a 30 or 40 person type, presentation, like at a school or something. And that's fine. So we have some states that are open. I think what I'll do is take advantage of that with my boys in our RV. We'll see some state parks. We'll randomly call radio stations, see if we can get on the air. We'll be I don't think with a 34-foot RV, fully wrapped, black and gold, Living Undeterred U.S. tour, we're going to have any problems with people wanting to talk to us. And that's the goal. I want people to have these conversations, and I really I'm going to really focus on making this not about me. I don't want to sit there and have to tell my story all the time. I want to hear your story. I want to share on our platform what America's feeling like, what America is hurting for, and ways. The other thing, James, is I want to highlight some of the alternative methods that are out there. In Reno, we have a stop with a company called Brain Health Restoration, which is researching brainwave technology. And our whole stop is going to be based on that. And then I've got some feelers out to try to get a stop in psychedelic research. Especially, I noticed the state of Oregon. Oregon just today, I think, approved psilocybin as an option.
Wow.
So, I've never done drugs in my life, but that shouldn't mean I shouldn't learn about these things that are out there that are, that could be alternatives. I mean, if what we were doing was working, I wouldn't even be doing this tour, So there's got to be so many ways that we can add more arrows to the quiver of mental health than what we're doing right now.
Yes, exactly. What can people expect when they show up at some of these locations where you're going to be?
Yeah, the tours we show up, we'll do a tour of the facility. I'll do some media. We have a publicist now we hired. We're really excited about getting him involved in promoting this locally and nationally. Do media interviews, meet the heads of the organizations, meet the local advocates we're calling, the Jeff Johnstons of each community that have lost somebody and then I'll speak for about 30 minutes, which I'm really fine-tuning my presentation. I want to make this really look, professional. I have a tendency to ramble too much, and I got people who are saying, nope, you got to have this down to the – so I'm working on that. And then the cool thing, James, is right after I'm done talking, we have a panel discussion for an hour. And we want to get a clinician on. We want to get a local advocate. We want to get someone from the nonprofit, and then myself. My sons have offered to sit on the panel, which is great because Roman and Ian both, being 20 and 18, could really add a new adolescent perspective instead of just adults up there talking. So, and then just wing it, we're just, we have a lot of flexibility we're leaving in the schedule. I have a feeling we'll get a lot of people to reach out to us that spontaneously want us to do things. So we're trying to stay a little bit flexible. I don't know. I'm slightly terrified, but I think the unknown part of it makes it exciting. It's like that letter I haven't read from Seth. It's like not really knowing about what's going to go kind of makes it exciting. You know?
Yeah, exactly. If people can't attend any of the events, how can they support you? How can they help be a part of this?
Great question. This is a huge one. I want to raise $1 million after expenses, and how I'm going to do that? Well, one way is a dollar from 1 million people, right? Or $2 from 500,000. Every single penny people can donate. I mean, you've seen gas. The RV is not cheap. It gets 7 miles a gallon.
Oh goodness! Wow.
So yeah, it's and in the wind it gets like 5. So yeah, we need to raise lots of money. And so anybody that feels inclined to donate, a couple things. First of all, our nonprofit is fully transparent. So I'm removing myself from any financial handling of the proceeds. And as a financial advisor, I understand fiduciary responsibility well. We also, at the very end, we're donating 50% of the profit, so after our expenses, to all the state partners that partner with us. So that's a unique angle. A lot of these organizations, they don't do that. But I want to put some of that money back in the communities that allowed us to come in, that invested this time, hit up their donors, hit up their followers to donate to our cause. I want to give some of that money back. So we're planning on giving half of that back at the end.
That is absolutely fantastic. I am super excited about this. I can't wait to be a part of maybe one of those panels down in Fort Lauderdale when you are here. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. I definitely want my viewers and listeners to know that I highly enjoy Chef Johnston and the Living Undeterred Tour. And so just know that I will definitely be contributing as well. If my viewers and listeners want to find more information, to donate, to be a part of this, to be this exciting event, where do they find all this information online?
Yeah, it's www.livingundeterred.com. And undeterred's a tricky word to spell, so it's undeterred.com. And on there is my podcast, which you were gracious to be a guest about a year ago, and all the information on the tour. My book is available for purchase. I'm looking for podcast guests. Anybody that's a follower, listener of yours that has an interest in the mental health or has a story to share, reach out to me. We're booking up podcast guests, and I'm excited for the future. I think there is a very good possibility that collectively, through all the people I'm going to meet, that there could be something that comes out of this. We're calling it After the Tour, and that's going to be something we're going to build to kind of shake up the mental health industry. Like I said, if things were working and the numbers were all getting good, I wouldn't have any interest in this. But obviously, it's painfully clear that across the board, overdose, suicide, and alcoholism deaths are all going up.
Yes. It's incredibly unfortunate, but I'm very much excited to hear what happens after the tour. So please keep me posted. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on my show today, Jeff Johnston. Once again, I am super honored to have you be a part of here. And so once again, if anything I can do, please let me know. My viewers and listeners also note that if they cannot find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmiller.lifeology.com. I'll have all of Jeff Johnston's information about the Living Undeterred Tour. Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, James. Appreciate your time.